If we want to survive as a species, not even as a civilization, but even just as a species, we are we are not going to be able to accelerate the exponential growth of our markets forever. There's only so much human time and attention. There's only so many resources. I mean, we have to be careful talking about this because talking like this can sound anti-capitalist, and that's now criminal in our country.
Welcome back, amazing friends, to another episode of The Hopeful Majority. I'm your host, Manu. And importantly, if you're new to the show and you're starved for nuanced conversations, and you're looking for a place where you can have productive dialogue, this is the place for you, The Hopeful Majority. Today, I have on a media theorist, an influencer, a writer, a person that's been a columnist at the New York Times, but has also written a lot of books and has thought deeply about what it means to actually, as we talk about, navigate the outrage industrial complex, and that is Douglas Rushkoff. I think you'll find this conversation fascinating, especially if you're thinking about how to navigate AI, because yesterday I just watched a video on superintelligence, and I'm a little freaked out because what does that mean for the prospect of bridge building? I know a lot of people are curious. I appreciate you being here. Let's get right into that conversation with Douglas Rushkoff. Douglas, welcome to the Hopeful Majority, sir.
Hi, good to be with you.
Thank you very much for making the time. I'll tell you, I was listening to a couple of your talks. We just finished up a conversation with Senator Andy Kim, who's a junior senator from New Jersey. First question his team asks is, how do you rejigger the incentive structures online to have less outrageous engagement? And my response to him was, well, I'm talking to the man for this question in about 35 minutes. So I told him, hold on, I want to ask you, how do you respond to that question given your years and decades in technological reporting?
Well, I mean, the easiest would be there's something called Section 230A, which sounds really archaic, but it's basically the laws around how the internet works. So way back when, in the old days, the internet had nothing commercial on it. It was just email and various bulletin boards and different things. You actually had to sign an agreement when you went online saying you promise not to do anything commercial, that you just use it for research. It was like a public library place. And back then, people still had email, and people could send weird, scary messages on email. Like, what if someone sent an email with instructions on how to make a bomb, or someone sent email, with some secret thing. And the government originally thought, well, if someone sends an email with directions on how to build a bomb, then we're going to arrest the internet service provider. We're going to arrest their email company because it was sent on that email.
Right.
And we're like, oh, no, that doesn't work. That doesn't work. That's not what it is. So they created a Telecommunications Act, which had this little clause in it called Section 230A that says the internet service provider isn't responsible. The person who creates the content is responsible. So if you're on a platform, if you have a magazine on a platform, the magazine is responsible for what it publishes. The platform isn't. So 20 years later, when the social media companies came up, they said, oh, we're part of this Section 230A too, because we're just letting people send stuff back and forth to each other, which was true to a point. But then social media companies realized they'd make a lot more money by using algorithms to pick every single story that you see, because they want to get you excited. They want to get you angry. They want to get you clicking on things. So they create almost like a little magazine editor in the form of an algorithm that's there to give you your personalized your personalized Facebook magazine, your personalized Twitter magazine. But they never changed the law. So now you have social media companies acting like publishers, but without any of the regulations or liabilities that publishers have. They are choosing the content you see, but they're not responsible for being a content provider like that, for being the actual writer. So that would be the easiest thing to change, is to say, no, you're all magazines now.
So you said that they almost are a provider that serves you the content that you want to be served.
Well, that you
And
want to be served. That's some part of
or
you.
that
That's some
you're
part of you.
demonstrating interest in.
Right. Right.
Right. So here's the challenge. I have yet to meet someone on the street, maybe outside of Marjorie Taylor Greene, that is like, dialogue is a bad thing. Or that I've yet to meet someone that's like, I want more outrageous content in my algorithmic feed. Almost everyone says, I wish I had less. And yet, it's clear that that's what they watch because that's what they're getting served. Who is at fault here? Is it the consumer who is making a behavioral choice that the algorithm is simply picking up on, which is what the social media company would say? Or is it the algorithm and the company? How do you think about that equation?
Who's at fault when someone goes to Las Vegas and loses all their money in a slot machine? The person, I guess, even if they have an addictive personality, even if the slot machine has hundreds of millions of dollars of research to create a pattern that's the most addictive possible pattern. What if the person's 11, 12, 13 years old and hasn't developed all of the defense mechanisms and then goes on that slot machine? They're going to get entrained by the slot machine. That's the way they're programmed. And they use the same algorithms in social media feeds. They ported them directly from Las Vegas slot machines. That's where they come from. So it's a combination of things. This is true for pornography, for alcohol, for heroin, for everything. Only the technological platforms are more addictive than the heroin or the fentanyl because there's more money and research going into making them as addictive as possible. So I would say it's not really fair. But it would be so easy to have a social media feed where you can turn off the algorithm.
Right. Well,
but they wouldn't like that because you wouldn't get addicted. You wouldn't use it as much. And if you get, anorexic or suicidal or violent or extremist as a result, social media company doesn't see it as their problem.
So I want to steelman this a little bit because I completely agree with you. I mean, we're trying to think about how do you have less outrage on the internet when the fact is humans like outrageous content and they like that. And we also like, content that is more empathetic and curious. If I'm a social media company, the fact is that I do have a responsibility for higher engagement because I need to make money, right? How do you fix that incentive structure? Because it is clear that there is less engagement when the algorithms are not hyper-focused on critique, on challenge, on outrage content. How do you fix that so that there's a world in which the social media companies don't necessarily lose their bottom line, but at the same time, we are making the incentives more attuned to productive engagement?
Well, one way to look at it is, at what point is a person's wealth enough? Could you say that once a person's earned $100 billion, could that be considered enough? But
what do you think?
I don't even think you really need much more than if you want to be insanely rich, 100 million is probably as much as you would need. Yeah. If you just limited, their wealth to $1 billion each, you would still have so many more $1 trillion back in circulation. But when you take a guy like Mark Zuckerberg, although I don't think he says this anymore, but for many years, he was saying he was going to give back 95 or 99% of his money to charity. You could say, well, what if Facebook had been 99% less extractive to begin with? Then, because the 99%, $99 percent of his money that he's going to put back in isn't going to get all the lives back. All the kids are dead. It isn't going to get all the health care back of the people who are sick. It isn't going to get, the conversation and government back that we've lost. It'll do some good. But if he had been 99% less extractive to begin with, he wouldn't need to do all this correction, and Facebook wouldn't have had to turn crazy. Where to stop it is, and I know this sounds like a dirty word, but is regulation. Regulation is not always terrible. Regulation is the reason how, and I know this is only maybe in a city, but see, we have most parts of the country have these lights, so that cars go when it's green and they stop when it's red, and these ones stop and those ones get to go. That regulation really helps.
Sure.
People get, and crosswalks and things really helps. I mean, sometimes it's a pain. You're sitting in the middle of the night and it's a green light on the other side, not yours. It's like, oh, this is stupid. Sometimes it's stupid. And it could be adjusted maybe for that. You just do flashing reds in the middle of the night, so you stop and go. But regulations help. So if we regulated social media companies and said, look, these algorithms aren't serving anyone, or using people's data against them isn't really serving them. There was a point when, and my friends actually did start Twitter. When Twitter was at its best, it was making $2 billion a year. And I understand $2 billion a year for a 140 character messaging app was fine. They should have stopped. Imagine calling grandma and saying, Grandma, I make a 140 character messaging app and I make $2 billion a year and I've got 30 employees and we're all sharing that $2 billion. That's a good thing. Good win. Invest.
You know what my grandma would say to that?
What?
Manu, but what about 4 generations down the line? I think you need to get to 10 billion.
Would she?
I'm kidding. I'm kidding. No, she
Probably
would not.
not.
She would not.
Probably not. Because the $2 billion a year, it adds up, right? And so the problem is that we have businesses that are not allowed to be successful. They have to keep growing no matter what, because there's all of these millions of, or not millions, but certainly thousands of investors who want to make money off that business by doing nothing. And they want the business to grow. And that growth mandate is why Twitter said, oh, well, what if we start selling data? Oh, what if we start screwing with people's heads? Oh, what if we start getting people all sensationalist and irritated? And that's what happens when you're trying to squeeze more money out of people and out of a business than it really deserves to have.
And I think this actually gets to where I want to take this conversation, because it goes to your root cause claim around AI as well, which is that it sounds to me that we're, based on what I've read that you've produced, that you would call this the industrial mindset, right? Where your North Star is entirely productivity. But before we go there, I want to ask you a slightly related question. You've been writing about technology for decades. What was your prediction about social media in 2002, 2003? And how is that prediction holding up today?
Well, it seems I was the one that actually came up with the term social media. A scholar came back to me, because it was back in like 94 that I used the term social media. But I didn't mean Facebook and Blogger and Twitter, because those didn't exist yet. What I was saying was that the internet is a social medium. And it feels like the internet fights off these efforts to make it into something else. So, it started as a kind of military thing, but everybody was just talking socially, sharing recipes and talking about Star Trek episodes. So the government didn't want it anymore. They said, fuck it, or pardon, if there's young people, they said, screw it.
I think that gets you more points, by the way, with the young people.
Oh, okay, good. They're damaged now. They're damaged. They hurt the youth. I think that'd be fine. They'll survive it somehow. No, they tried to sell the internet at that point to AT&T, and AT&T didn't want it because they didn't think you could make any money off this thing, because people were just talking. Then big business came with the dot-com boom. The dot-com boom, for those who were too young, was when business tried to come in and turn all these internet websites, that's what we used to use instead of apps, these websites, into businesses, into stores. And there was a big stock market boom, and then it crashed. And then social media companies came. So, and it was called Web 2, things like Facebook and Twitter and Blogger, where people share, and Tumblr. And then that would be the new internet. Now that sort of reached a peak, and then now they're thinking it's going to be, AI or crypto or something else, or Web 3 it was supposed to be. It was virtual reality online. That was going to be the thing. So it keeps changing. But each time I feel like the social mandate of these technologies, people's need to actually connect with each other, to bridge, as you would say, all the different divides, and go, oh my gosh, there's someone from another country. When I was in 1992 in the early net, and I have this conversation, I'm like 20 something, and there's a 14-year-old kid who's teaching me about Gundam, and he's in Japan telling me about the various evolution of Gundam and Neon Evangelion and all those things. And I'm learning from him like he's a professor. And it's like, wow, I can learn from people I didn't realize I can learn from. It was bridging all sorts of divides. That's the social agenda of these technologies. So social media did not.
Did you think that it would be as? Did anyone think that it would be as polarizing?
Well, yeah. I mean, a bunch of us did worry about it because digital technology was built on a binary structure. Everything is a 1 or 0, a yes or no. That's the way that digital code works. So we were concerned with that. And very early on, because people very early on were either saying, they were either techno-utopians, saying the internet's great, or they were techno-pessimists saying the internet's going to kill us all. And I was part of a group, we called ourselves techno-realists, which meant that there's both good and bad. It's not, it depends how we use it. It's not an unbiased blank slate, but human intervention in the machine really does matter. How we program these platforms is going to matter. So when social media came around, I thought originally, yay, this is going to re-socialize the net. And it was doing that. But then when the social media companies needed to earn more than the billions of dollars they were earning, that's when Google turned around and said to its investors, oh, well, we have all this data, all the searches that people left behind. We know a lot about a person by what they searched for. Maybe we could sell that. And that's when.
And is that constant productive mindset that you were so critical of?
Yeah, not even productive, but
industrial. I think
yeah, to make money.
Right.
And the industrial age was really good at extracting maximum value from people in the least amount of time, whether as consumers or as workers.
And we're getting better at that. But how do you respond to the critique that it's just wishful thinking, because we will always want to make money? So it's relatively utopian to think that you can enter a new age of technology like AI without that being, let's say, the dominant North Star.
Well, I still believe that there's a strong possibility that human beings will survive this century. I think we can do it. I really do.
By the way, for most people, I don't think they thought that was up for debate.
That they think we're not going to make it?
No. Most people, the fact that you have to even say that there's a strong possibility that we'll make it, I don't think most people on the street are even contemplating human extinction.
Oh, I think they are. I think they are. I think if you do a survey about your kids, with the kids who are listening to this.
Well, no, I know the kid, but these are plugged in, like they're most of Gen Z struggles with nihilism, right? That's like
right.
So I'm sure they do.
The thing is,
anyway, this is an aside, but it's just fascinating.
If we want to survive as a species, not even as a civilization, but even just as a species, we are not going to be able to accelerate the exponential growth of our markets forever. There's only so much human time and attention. There's only so many resources. I mean, we have to be careful talking about this, because talking like this can sound anti-capitalist, and that's now criminal in our country. To speak like this. So I want to be careful. So the easiest way to say it is if you need a company to grow exponentially, then it has to find more stuff. It has to find more product and more people to consume that product. So it takes more of our time, more of our attention, more of our scrolling, more of our participation. This worked for colonial empires that were expanding around the world and had more territories to conquer and more peoples to enslave. But when you no longer have more territories and people to put into the furnace of your growth, and when you have digital tools that could do it so much faster, when you think, how much faster can an artificial intelligence grab stuff than a printing press? And you get some sense of, oh, we can't keep this up, right?
Sure.
So what we have to do is work on creating what I would call sustainable business. And this is the idea that you should be allowed to have a business that is profitable and to stay at that rate of profitability as long as you want and just grow with the rate of inflation, right? Luigi opens a pizzeria. He's making $200,000 a year profit on his pizzeria. And he can raise his prices slowly with inflation so that 202,000, 204,000. He should be allowed to do that. That should be okay, right? In the digital industrial world, that's not allowed. Every digital business has to keep growing, growing, growing. And in order to grow, it has to take from something, from someone, even if it's just your attention. And in order to keep getting that attention, it has to distract you from your family, from your life, from your sleep, from something else. That's what do the streaming media companies feed on? Your sleep. They're taking your sleep.
You're sacrificing social capital and mental health for financial capital.
Right. And in most consumer cases, you're not even getting the financial capital. You're just getting
so the audience will know this. I would love to go down this question of how do you actually envision and create sustainable business in your worldview? Because I think there's a lot of policy implications there.
No, I did a whole book on that, and that's this: Throwing Rocks at the Google Bus, How Growth Became the Enemy of Prosperity. And the easiest thing we could do is a little tax policy shift. Right now, this thing called capital gains, which is the growth of a company, that's taxed very low, but earnings are taxed really high, which seems crazy. So that means you want your company not to earn a lot, but you want it to grow a lot. I think we should flip that. Tax growth really high because we don't have room for more growth, and rather tax earnings really low so everybody could be profitable. Earnings are cool. You could share earnings with your employees. You can be rich and spend it. You don't have to just keep growing.
So I'll just say for the audience, because of my annoying schedule and all that's going on, we only have 15 more minutes with Douglas. If he's so kind, we're going to do a part 2. We're going to dive deeper. So stay tuned for that part 2, where I think this economic discussion, I think maybe we bring on someone else as well on the other side to debate this. I think is a fascinating thing to dive further into. I know Scott Galloway, who you might know, is also someone that thinks deeply about some of this work. I want to drive to the AI question. You mentioned in a recent speech that the opportunity of AI is to get into generative thinking, right? And it sounds like what you're saying here is that we missed the opportunity of the internet because we've stuck with this sort of high growth mindset. And importantly, let me be nuanced here. You're not just critiquing high growth. You're critiquing high growth at the cost of other things like your sleep, your mental health, your well-being. How do you drive generative thinking in a world of AI, and how do you make AI and the shift into it more productive for the standpoint of human flourishing?
Well, the easiest way to motivate people to do generative thinking with AI is that they want to keep their jobs or stay relevant. So if you keep using AI just to get answers, then you're going to make yourself more stupid and you're going to commoditize whatever your profession is, because everybody else who's asking AI a question is getting the same answers, right? So what you want to do instead is think of AI as a learning partner. So you learn a lot about the thing that you're working on, and then show your work to the AI and ask the AI, what do you think? How could I do better? Where are the flaws in my logic? Or work on a problem for a while. And after you've gotten to a certain point, a certain ceiling, then ask the AI, how do I get further on this question? MIT just did a study of people working with AI, and they found that people that go to AI for answers, their brains make fewer and fewer connections. People who work without AI make a good number of connections, but people who work first and then go to the AI for more advanced work, they end up with the most brain connections. So if you work
Yes.
on a problem, then go to AI, you end up getting smarter. So my argument for working generatively with AI, using AI to iterate your questions and come up with better questions and better questions, is that you become better at what you do rather than worse at what you do. And your company or industry still has a need for you rather than being ready to discard you.
How do you respond to the argument that yes, we can reduce the exponential growth of a market, right? Because we'll hit a rate limit. But the fact is, there's a national security race with China, right? And there's a geopolitical dynamic here, which is that if we don't grow our models fast enough, if we don't stay highly productive, if we don't keep go, 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 China wins. How do you deal with that geopolitical dynamic as it relates to sort of your aspiration for AI being more generative as opposed to productive?
Well, I would argue, first off, that people working generatively with AI end up with better, more advanced solutions. People working in a flat way with AI end up with the solutions that the AI already has, averaging down to whatever the mean is. People who work, it's basically you're saying, I mean, in some ways the question is, why have smart people if we're racing with China? And my
Yeah.
argument is that smart people would do better in a race against China than dumb people. You know, they don't move fast, and
Unless the AI could just be smarter than everybody.
but it can't be. AIs are not smart. AIs are the internet. That's all
Mm.
AI is right now, large language models anyway. I mean, maybe there will be AI, someone will develop it in some other way, but large language models are the only kind of AI people work with today.
Have you read the paper AI 2027?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. And have you seen the scenario that they walk through with for anyone that's listening and has does not know what I'm talking about? AI 2027 was a paper written by some of the top predictors of AI, and one of the things that they walk through is what is a scenario. They offer a 3-year scenario where they build a giant agent, and it's not just an LLM; it's compounding, and so it is actually literally smarter than it gets closer to AGI. Is I guess what the paper's prediction
We'll
is.
see. There's lots of
Um,
interesting predictions on who's going to do what with whom. But whoever's going to even develop that, I would argue, is somebody who is currently working in a generative fashion, right? I
right.
think being smart and learning is always good. Having smarter people will always be good. And I don't think it slows anything down. But the other
Hmm.
question is the premise of, when we use competition with China as a motivator, I'm always a little suspicious. If you look at the sweep of history, competitive pyramidal civilizations get brittle and fall, whereas collaborative, cooperative, horizontal civilizations tend to flourish. As we all are recognizing from the very obvious signs in America, our civilization has become extremely brittle. And I don't know that amping it up with competitive fears is the best way to move into the sort of bridging type society that you're talking about. What I would say to you is the same question is, why build bridges when we can build towers?
No, I concur. I mean, well, let me ask you this. You're talking to an audience of people that are the leading experts in thinking about how you have pluralism flourish in the 21st century in the United States. And how do you actually ensure that there are people that think about collaboration, bridge building as a leading skill set? What would your advice be to someone that is trying to enable pluralism and bridge building in a world dominated by AI?
Go local. Go local. AI is great for scaled solutions at the scale of the internet.
Hmm. I guess, do you see AI potentially aligned with that North Star
It could
of
be.
a more pluralistic society where
Yeah. I mean, the people at Pluriverse, Divya Siddhart
no,
and
I actually
that
don't.
whole
I
crowd.
don't.
Yeah. Check out the Pluriverse. They're looking at how to use blockchain, AI, and all these things um, for for exactly what you're saying. That's their mission. Uh, Let me see. Or you go to where is she? She's not in my email here,
Mhm.
but they're also
While you find that, like, I guess my more direct question is just social media has accelerated polarization. It is the number one response that people provide to me when I ask them what is a driving condition of outrage prevailing in our discourse because of the algorithms and the incentive structures. How do we avoid that problem with AI?
you would need a different uh, set of people and organizations developing it for reasons other than short-term profit. So one way would be to have a public stack. I know we can't do that in America because we don't. The idea of the public is considered communist, but there's still a public sensibility in Europe where you could have, um, a civic stack. What would that look like? A civic set of agents. What would you put into it? Marina Gorbis at Institute for the Future is very interested in what a civic stack would look like. What services would people actually want from an AI, and how would you build that? In South America, there's some effort toward that. In Brazil, there's places where you can get involved in it. It's just hard right now. It's hard in the U.S. because it sounds anything public library, any of those things sound too leftist, but
Hmm.
it's not impossible if you do it in a more global way.
I'm sensing a pessimism from you about public private solutions. But one thing that I would just push on is I think that it's not that they sound leftist, actually. I think there's a populist or tendency where people are skeptical of private institutions on the left and the right. And I actually do think people are interested in not public market solutions, but public private partnerships. So I'm just curious why you're so uh concerned or skeptical
Well, because
or cautious.
we're speaking openly now, and I understand that we're living in a world where advocating for a public library could um, sounds different to people right now.
Well,
That
Douglas,
it's
the hopeful
tricky.
majority people, the hopeful majority's got your back, brother. It's because they because they don't know where I stand politically. They
Right.
don't, and that's the thing is like that's where I, in general, what I'm really passionate about and really excited about is that there is a huge opportunity right now in this country for a countercultural rebellion against a
Right.
politics of
Right.
toxicity.
And I think the way
And
to
I
do
and I
that,
want to make sure
though,
technology's on our side.
right.
That's why I'm interested in
I
talking to
think
you.
technology can be on our side with that. But right now, I think both sides of the political spectrum can see that AI technologies are, for the most part, run by people who do not have our best interests at heart. That they're run by billionaires who have told me live in person that they think a majority of humanity is going to die and that their technologies will allow them and a few select others to survive, either by getting off the planet, uploading their psyche, creating a feudal fort of some kind or a private city for them to live. Given that that's the case, I do think that we can develop AI technologies that don't depend on huge data stores. That what we do is, instead of using giant data sets and probabilistic mathematics, we use small data sets and fractal mathematics, generative math, even on a small data set, to get something much more lifelike in your AI rather than just data. That said, we're going to get better and better at using the entire internet as a data commons, and smaller programs capable of using that data the way an AI does. It's getting easier and easier all the time. That said, I still think human beings have the home field advantage on planet Earth, right here, talking to your neighbors. All those problems with social media and the figure on the screen and all the images and all the propaganda, almost all of that goes away if you stop looking at the screen and engage with your actual neighbors. How can I help this neighbor? How can that neighbor help me? What's the old person on my block? Why hasn't she been invited to anyone's house for Christmas? It's the easiest stuff in the world. It's fun. A block party, a barbecue. Who needs tools? Let's have one lawnmower on the block instead of one for every family on the block. I know it sounds communist. What happens to the lawnmower company if you are sharing lawnmowers? It's tricky. We have to wind down. We have to start thinking of things differently, but we'll live better lives.
Why did you start writing about technology in the first place? That's my last question. Like, why this? I mean, you're obviously a really smart and interesting thinker, and I can tell that you're really passionate about your ideas. Why technology?
I mean, I was a theater person originally. Theater was my thing, theater, and I like TV. And I felt that both theater and TV had gotten really commercial, really top down. Um, it felt like it was elites running these things, particularly theater. And the internet was emerging in the late 80s and early 90s. And I thought, oh, look, a more accessible people's medium, that this will be where we can all do art and be crazy and have fun together and not have to spend $100 to go see a play in order to do it. And for a very short time, for a couple of years, it was that, until business people came and said, oh, how do we make money off this thing rather than just letting people have fun with each other? And so it was early on the scene. And so I was one of the first people to really describe what was happening. I ended up coining this term viral media that really that caught on. And so after that, then I'm some kind of media expert. So I kind of leaned into that.
Why didn't you go build your own thing instead of writing?
Oh, to make a business or something?
Yeah, because what you're talking about, in some ways, someone actually needs to win in your model of sustainable business, win, whatever that means, to prove that it's possible, right? And I'm curious if you banged your head against this wall for 20 years and why you haven't yet just said, you know what, I'll just go build it.
Oh, because I've got dozens of people who have built things based on my ideas. Everything from couch surfing to meetup.com to Indiegogo, which preceded Kickstarter. These all came out of books and articles and things that I wrote. So I think I have more influence that way than getting stuck at like a startup,
I asked you that question because we have a lot of young people that listen to the show, and one of the ways that I think you get past polarization is to understand what actually drives people at their core. Like, what values do they care about? How do they think about making an impact? So you don't immediately judge. Like, I might disagree with Douglas and think he's a communist, right? Let's say take your worst critique, but I understand how he thinks about creating an impact. And I think that's important. So I really appreciate you sharing that, Douglas. And more importantly, thank you so much for coming on the show. If you're someone that's listening, so you find this conversation fascinating, and you'd like Douglas on for part 2, let us know. Let our team know. And importantly, every Monday, YouTube, Spotify, Apple, wherever you get your content, we're trying to build alternative platforms. And if you agree with the idea that viral media has destroyed the ways in which we live, but we have opportunity and hope, the hopeful majorities for you. Douglas, thank you for coming on the show, and we hope to see everybody next week.
Cool. I will remain a hope fiend.